I'm Kimberlee Pérez. My pronouns are she, her, and on campus I am an assistant professor in performance studies in the Department of Communication. My road to communication was a little bit varied. My undergraduate degree was in women's studies, and there in women's studies I became so interested in the ways in which people tell stories, in which ways the personal is political. And so questions of race and gender and sexuality were already part of my life just through my own lived experience and my history. But then in women's studies, they were more overtly discussed. And it was the one time in my undergraduate degree that I found that those things were freely discussed, they were expected to be discussed, they were part of analyses. And then when I was going to go to graduate school, I turned to communication. I had taken a couple of communication classes at the end of my undergraduate degree, and what I found was that communication is a place where those topics also can be discussed, but they can be discussed through more of an emphasis on speech and specifically creativity. So in communication, what I found was that stories and the construction of stories and what stories do really matters, as well as the element of crafting performance that's not theater, but performance that's based in people's everyday experiences, more autobiographical performance. So for me, communication blended those two interests that I always had in women's studies. The Department of Communication at UMass has a really long history of being quite a strong department in the area of, more broadly in the area of social justice, of people who teach and study here that are interested in doing social justice work in the world, of asking really critical questions about communication and communication practices. And so I've been familiar with this department for a very long time. I came for a conference here when I was a grad student in Maine, and I just thought that it was incredible, and I had always actually dreamed of being here. So when the opportunity for a job opened up in my area, I was so excited to apply, and it was just no question that I wanted to be here. The course called On Citizenships and Belongings is a 400 level course, and well, I guess it's useful to know that I teach a 300 level course, an IE class, on the performance and politics of race. And that class really looks at race with its intersections of other things like gender and sexuality and class and ability and all the things that it intersects with. And in Citizenships on Belonging, we kind of take those foundational discussions of race and gender and sexuality and so forth and take them into the topic of belonging and citizenship. So asking questions of who do you belong to and how do you belong to those people? What makes you a citizen? How do people understand citizenship? Who gets to belong as a citizen and not? And so we really take those foundations of identity, of race, gender, sexuality, ability, nation, so forth, and take them into this larger topic of citizenship and who and how we belong to. Performing Survival is a graduate seminar. It's a special topics seminar in which we're really centering the question of survival and what it means to survive, and really not, what do I want to say? I suppose looking at narratives of survival, the ways that people take their experiences of trauma or oppression, similarly, like they take their experiences of living race and gender and sexuality and ability and so forth, and weave narratives out of that, narratives that are funny, narratives that are don't try to solve anything, they're not trying to resolve survival, they're really just talking about how they live it. So my book on queer intimacy is looking at the ways in which personal narratives are all around us and really asking the question of what those personal narratives are doing. And so what I'm suggesting through looking at people's personal narratives is are the ways in which personal narratives both talk about relationships and also construct relationships with audiences. And so in looking at performance, those kinds of performance as intimacy, looking at how we might better understand intimacy. And I also work on performance myself. Right now, I am working on a performance piece called The Quietest Camper. And so what I'm really interested in there are the ways in which I'm looking at the intersections of survivorship, of being survivor of different types of violence, racial violence, sexual violence, and looking at the ways in which that intersects with a person who doesn't speak a lot. So it's really looking around the ways in which I'm kind of a quiet person by nature, and I'm starting with a story of when I was young, I went to sleepaway camp once, and I think probably as is often the case when you leave a group place when you're a kid, you often get some sort of acknowledgement of who you are in the group, right? You're the best swimmer, you're the best talker, you're the best whatever. And so I got a little award that said quietest camper. So I'm looking at the strategies of silence and the ways in which people use silence to communicate about things and what silence does and means. It's an incredible experience to be recognized by your colleagues, to say that the work that people see you doing is valuable and important, and it was just really incredibly meaningful and again quite humbling to be recognized in that way. It's a little uncomfortable to be that visible for me, but I love what I do, and it's really kind of a cool thing to be recognized for doing. My great-grandmother, who was from Mexico, died shortly after I was born, and I really, from the perspective that I have now, from who I am today, I would love to go back and have dinner with my great-grandmother. I think that would be, I would have so many questions for her. I have so many blanks in my family stories, and I would really love to sit down with her and chat about those things. There was a scholar, he's still a very important performance studies scholar. His name is Jose Munoz, and this is one of the people that I loved his work, right? His work was so important to me. I didn't always understand it, but I thought it was like just so smart and so informative of who I am. And I did get to have dinner with him, and then I saw him a few years later at a conference, and he's one of these really famous people, and he was always surrounded by people, and I happened to be at a conference and he was there standing by himself, and he turned to me and he was like, "Hi," and I was like, oh, I introduced myself and I said, "Do you remember me? We saw each other," and he said, "Of course I remember you." And I was so shocked, like he would remember me of all the people that he knows and all the people that he meets. And so 6 months after that, he died quite suddenly. And I would love the chance to go back and again talk to him and ask him so many questions and see what he thinks of things that are happening now and in performance and in the world. And I think that'd be really cool. Also, thank you for your help. There's another woman, again, when I read her as an undergrad and then again in graduate school, so informative, so important. I'm going to say two people. I'd love to have dinner with Audre Lorde and Gloria Anzaldúa at the same table. Two queer women of color who were so important in the work that they did. They were so generous in their writing. They were so incisive, so critical. And I would just love to sit and listen to them talk about anything. I think it'd be a pretty incredible dinner.